Hello, 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 everyone. It is Kristi. It is Sunday, and that means it is time for Weekend Winters. How y'all doing? I hope you're doing well. I'm still a little bit setting up because, if it wasn't Kristi organizing herself at the last minute, would it really be a Sunday show? Well, I'm looking at it. My sound seems okay. The music is faded back, and we're going to get into the desktop audio in a second. So, let me know if there's any problems with the sound in the chat there. But otherwise, I'm going to swap it over. I can show you guys and say hello to who is here so far today. So let's have a look at that. Hey Flint, good to see you as ever. Es freut mich sehr, dich zu sehen. It pleases me a lot to see you. Il nil magnifico. I'm having problems. This is the first time I've spoken today. This is the first time I'm using my words, so forgive me. Thyra Sharon, hi, are you new to the Sunday show? I don't recognize your name. If so, welcome. If you've been a lurker, well then, drop yourself in the chat a bit more. City Life 2050, hello. Sib Wolf, good to see you. I don't know if you saw last night's, I'm so sorry, a little personal side to Sib Wolf there. I don't know if you jumped in only on the part 2 of last night during our D&D session, but you have to go back and watch part 1, where I do the most cool rule of cool move ever in the game. It was amazing. Who else is in there? Po Mama said hello. Sunny but no snow. I'm ready for it to be spring. I am so ready for it to be spring. Nice rope, yes. I am getting out. I'm trying to go with my 1920s Phryne Fisher inspired looks now. So I got out some of my classier things to wear. And yes, it's like a beautiful kimono kind of thing. So here's something pretty to look at. I'll see if I can give you more of the sense of it's just very elegant, is it not? Anyway, so moving from elegant to inelegant. Today on the show, we are going to discuss or break down, refute, dispute, how do you counter propagandize or counter or undermine the propaganda of this video that was put up by PragerU. And theory I usually watch after the fact. Okay, yeah, and I'm also, how do people feel about this time slot? Because I think I just picked 12 o'clock at random, but my life has kind of changed a little bit, so I'm thinking about maybe shifting it, give myself even more time to lie in on a Sunday. I might shift it permanently to 1 o'clock just to that didn't help. When you clean your glasses and they work out, end up being dirtier than when you started. Nothing like bright lights to show you how much dust or whatever else there is on your glasses. So today we're going to look at a PragerU video, which I know people are like, well, but they just constantly put out propaganda. And this one is particularly insidious because all of it might not look as devious and as dangerous as it is when you just watch it. But when you take the entire video and its message together, it's basically anti-science. Not only that, it's misrepresenting how science functions and what science is. And I thought, because, these natural scientists don't know when to stay in their lane when it comes to philosophy. The philosophy of science, I gotta school these boys. And of course, like the PragerU video will get over 1 million, and I'll probably get about 500. However, I still feel it necessary to do it. What? Not now. Okay, so let me go to my history library. History. Follow the science, my butt. Okay. So yes, as I mentioned, we're gonna break down a PragerU video, and then I will. This time is good. Okay, so let's talk about I'm up for that. Po Mama said, don't worry about it. Yeah, let's just shift over. If it works out for everybody else and nobody else minds, let's go ahead and do a 1 hour shift forward then, and I'll keep putting like 1 hour later or new time or something on the video just to remind you when I create it. Okie dokie. So here is. Let's just look at the description. Brian Keating is an astrophysicist at a major university. Now, at the end, he says it's UC San Diego, and I have contacted UC San Diego on Twitter to point out his participation in a far-right, racist, white supremacist propaganda group that's been defunded by YouTube because it puts out propaganda, and asking him if that's the look they want their uni to have, but that's neither here nor there. science is his life. But when he hears someone say to follow the science, he gets nervous, because that's not how science works and never has. All of this is freaking crap. And what we're going to find here is fundamentally a misunderstanding of ontology, what exists, how it exists. And of course, if you don't understand sort of like how something exists, you're not able to properly articulate the information about it when you're trying to describe it. So, oh, thank you, Flint. Very bohemian, especially with the robe. Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. I just actually topped up my coffee supply on my list, and I got some like bio, as they call it, which is the organic stuff. They're promoting like a local grower. I'm like, yeah, I'll spend the extra. So thank you. I'm gonna be drinking coffee on you when that one comes. But in advance of that, thank you, Flint. I appreciate it. Mwah. You read. I've gone on and on and on about the philosophy of science with you guys a lot. So you should be pretty well prepared and well grounded in the critique that we are about to engage in, because it's not just me. It's us as a group. And the problem is, he wants to treat science as like this thing over here that exists separate from human beings. And that somehow human beings, who are the ones who created the process of knowledge production, or fact production, really, and agreeing all the various steps that are required for a scientific process to be valid, somehow now it exists outside of us. And we can't critique it or talk about it or reconceive it or add to it or anything like that. This is crap, right? Science is a social process. It's not a thing. And for better or for worse, like, you know, whatever we say science is science. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that science is always going to map onto observations, right? But this idea that somehow science is an objective lens, and if you just do these things, you're going to produce, well, it says knowledge here. And yet science, as I said, every single step along the way is underpinned by values. What counts as a valid measure of something? We can try to employ metrics to say, okay, we're measuring this thing that we want to use in our model as a variable. Let's say it's age in years or miles or something. You can go ahead and make those measurements, and I forget where I'm going with this point, but I think the point is that, yeah, we sort of decide, okay, is this a valid measurement or not? That's an agreement. Is this model, what are the standards for accepting or rejecting the hypothesis? That's a value, right? And that's completely aside from ethics and the morality of conducting scientific investigations. And I would argue that the ethics are not separable from the process of science. So there's a lot here that it might on its face look like a pretty reasonable video, and that he's being, oh, look, you know, science isn't perfect and we have to be cautious. But that's not what he's doing. What he's doing here is actually undermining people's, I don't want to say faith, but it's forcing people, it's not forcing people, it's encouraging people to question even valid scientific conclusions for no other reasons other than, well, maybe you're gotten it wrong. Which is a valid question if you know what you're asking, but just blind skepticism is not critique. Anti-intellectualism is not a good analysis of a method, okay? Just saying, nuh-uh, is not going to move science forward. So I think it'll be easier if we watch the video and I kind of point out how insidious it is. And Flint, it's the steps we take to verify the veracity of the theoretical claims. Exactly! Like you can have, and he doesn't even explain what a theory is, but I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm very agitated because these things annoy me. I would stop doing science wrong, you know? Stop asking natural scientists who don't study philosophy and who don't work in the social sciences and are completely divorced from the ethical requirements that are even linked to medical and psychological studies, let alone, personal data ethics and those kinds of things. As if his science is, just stay in your lane, buddy. Stay in your lane, Brian. All right. So I'm going to turn on the sound now, and we're going to watch this and break it down. And then afterwards, I might look at the link if they have one of those workbook links, because that's one thing I didn't have a chance to look at yet. So here we go.
I'm an astrophysicist at a major university. Science is my life. But when I hear somebody somberly intone, science says, or follow the science, I get very nervous.
Okay, so first of all, why? I mean, presumably in these situations, when you're saying follow the science, you're talking about peer-reviewed findings. That's how science builds knowledge, right? So we publish facts that we have interpreted, which is actually the middle step between science and knowledge is fact production and fact interpretation, which is a step he misses out here. Why wouldn't you? Why is he asking us to be nervous about good science? He's not saying here bad science is a problem or tentative or exploratory scientific analysis is the problem. He's just saying if something is peer-reviewed, you shouldn't believe it. Now, there are ways to critique science, but this is not it. So the standards are decided upon are arbitrarily. Absolutely. I'm sorry, but that is true. It is the case that our cutoff points, the various conventions of how accepted practice are meant to be done are simply arbitrarily assigned. Let's look at the, like your spelling, the p-value cutoff point for whether or not a variable is statistically significant. That's a lot of jargon, but basically, when do we decide at what level of error in our sample are we willing to tolerate to say, well, there might be some error, but we're pretty sure this is the conclusion. In the social sciences, that might be 0.05. 5 times out of every 100 samples, this number would be wrong, but 95 it would be right. So we're pretty good. We're pretty clear on that. That's different from a medical study when you need an error rate of like 1 in 1,000, not 5 in 100, right? And those are value judgments, and that is part of science. So the idea that a scientist would get nervous when people say, follow the science, which is an interpretation of follow the results. Why? Why is he undermining something like peer-reviewed findings? And what basis?
Science doesn't belong to any ideology.
I mean, ideology is okay. Here, let's actually question that. Let's pull this apart. What is an ideology? An ideology, I think, is a system of ideas and ideals, especially one which forms the economic or political theory and policy. Now, also the science of ideas, the study of their origin and nature, that's a little bit less. But I'm sorry, science is a system of ideas and ideals. So actually it is an ideology if you want to talk about the way in which all of these values are connected together in order to produce a coherent sort of like outcome in terms of a thought process or procedure, right? So I would disagree. I think science is itself an ideology.
Science is the never-ending search for new knowledge.
No, I mean, no. I mean, yes and no. So sometimes science is about going back and, I guess, searching for knowledge. Okay, let's give him this one. I feel a little bit like I disagree with his continual replacement of the word facts for knowledge. And let me explain why, right? Science itself, the results of science, the facts produced by a study, must then be taken by individuals and interpreted and put into a context in order to produce knowledge. So there's a middle step here, which is it's based on facts. And the other part of that is that we work with the best facts that we can produce at a time, but those facts themselves can be tested and changed later on, right? So science is actually like a fact production mode. Its purpose is to tell us when our descriptions, our stories of how the world works, whether or not they actually map onto the observations we have. And so there is a human step in the production of knowledge that is not a direct result of the scientific process. There's an interpretation process there that he's missing.
That's what science means in Latin, by the way, knowledge. Not wisdom, not morality, not social policy. Knowledge.
Congratulations. I don't know how much social policy was a phrase thrown around in ancient, Rome, but okay.
What we do with that knowledge is where wisdom, morality, and social policy enter the picture. Knowledge, it turns out, isn't so easy to come by. And sometimes what we think we know for certain, the Earth sure does look flat when we're standing on it, turns out not to be so certain.
So, again, what he's doing here is setting up a grounds for undermining science by saying, oh, look, there are some really reasonable conclusions you can draw, but you can't trust them. Now, is it true that we can't trust our senses and that we need triangulation with other people to socially produce knowledge that is so abstracted and so consistent in terms of how people experience it? We can move from, I think this is what I experience, to we think this is generally how the world works. Yes, but you don't have to doubt everything in science. There are levels of confidence we can have in findings, and he fails to explain what the grounds are for accepting the scientific results as reliable in this video.
Of course I trust in basic scientific truths, those things for which there is overwhelming evidence.
Okay, basic scientific truths like the existence of racism in U.S. policing, or other basically like a lot of Western policing practices. There's overwhelming evidence for that. That's a scientific truth, and yet that is questioned here in PragerU. So what counts as overwhelming evidence is a value judgment, isn't it? And yet he's leaving that part of it out.
It's like, say, gravity, even that humans play a role in the warming of the planet.
So he's using only natural science frameworks here to talk about when science is reliable, when the fact is that it's not natural science or social science that determines whether or not the findings are reliable. It's the method of science applied to it and the rigor that tells us whether or not the results can be generalized, and we think of that as being reliable. So again, this is a whole thing of like basically trying to put up natural sciences as this truth production factory, and yet also at the same time undermining scientific claims. It's kind of weird.
But scientists, even the best ones, can get things wrong. The brilliant astrophysicist Sir Fred Hoyle believed the universe existed in a steady state forever and
all right, so yes, scientists who are working with the best information they have sometimes don't have the best information. But, what he doesn't, whom he does not quote in this is, it's interesting because it's the perfect quote. Bertrand Russell. Yes, and it's about science, liberal view, tentative, I think is the word he uses. Yes. Interesting that they do not quote here from Russell in this way. So let me find the word. Yes, I agree to your terms. Find. Control F. Let me Control F this. All right. Liberal. Okay. Tentative. What? You lied to me if you told me that. Oh, you piece of crap video website. All right, so anyway. Here. Basically, he was saying that the scientific view is held much like the liberal view, which is undogmatic and ready to be corrected. Yes, called the liberal or scientific outlook. Let me try if I can find the actual quote here, because the choice of wordings is pretty. Oh, yes, philosophy and politics, the essence of the liberal outlook. Okay, we're back here, and ich bin sehr frustriert. Bertrand Russell basically said that the idea of a scientific view is a lot like the liberal view, which is to go with the best evidence, but not hold your views dogmatically, but be open to changing your mind when better evidence arises. So, sorry. So yeah, because other people made what we now know to be erroneous conclusions, doesn't mean that all science is somehow unreliable.
Had no beginning. But his view, once held sacrosanct by all astrophysicists, no longer holds. It's been superseded by the Big Bang theory that the universe had a beginning and is still expanding.
So what is he doing here? He's like, oh, look, our scientific views today might be undermined by the future, so don't believe in science. Or question science, or be skeptical about science. The whole video is about why you shouldn't rely on scientific results, and he doesn't provide any good guides for when you can have confidence in a scientific claim.
In the 20th century, some of the most respected scientists in the world, including Nobel Prize winners, believed in eugenics.
Oh, look at, again, this is more like, oh, look at smart people who got things wrong. Okay, nobody doubts that, but the question is, how do we know when science is producing valid facts? And all he's doing here is undermining.
The reprehensible idea that the human race could be improved by selective breeding. The National Academy...
Wait. The reprehensive idea, though, isn't it? You notice how he said, like, science doesn't have an ideology, but here you are saying, and I agree, that eugenics and there are things that science should not be associated with, and that you cannot properly practice science if you are harming human beings. That's ethics are an ideology, too.
of Sciences, the American Medical Association, and the Rockefeller Foundation supported it. By the middle of the century, it had been thoroughly rejected as quackery. No reputable scientist would have anything to do with this idea.
So again, like, okay, we're talking about all the ways things got wrong, people got science wrong, or here, this is not, what they did was they did unethical science, right? And they had bad assumptions from the start. And so it's just like the whole point of, I thought science was above this, right? But no, science is made up of people, and that's why we constantly have to check, trust but verify, as it were. Like if a scientific study is done well, that's the best information we have. However, it's not the end all be all. It's not the end of the conversation. And that's a very subtle line to walk, and Prager doesn't help people find that line in this video.
So, we all need to get over this notion that just because someone, be it a politician, a bureaucrat, or even a scientist, employs the phrase, science says, means whatever they're saying is right.
What this is attacking here is Dr. Fauci. And it's basically undermining the premise that we can, when a scientist doesn't have time to go through every single study, she's too busy to like, here's this study, here's this study, here's this study, and she takes the conclusions of a bunch of studies or the most recent results of, let's say, like a vaccine test, and refers to it generically as science. The science here says that this vaccine works. What Brian and PragerU want people to do is not believe them. That's it. This whole video is about undermining people's confidence in scientific results.
It might be right, but it might also be wrong.
See, I'm just asking questions. Oh, you're saying it's the science, but the science might be wrong. Like, on what basis? This is it. On what basis is the science wrong? And if and he's not giving people criteria here to evaluate scientific studies or scientific conclusions or how facts are produced. He's just planting seeds of doubt. And that is anti-science, anti-intellectual propaganda, promoted by a dude who works at UC San Diego in the physics department. WTF.
And if it's wrong, it won't necessarily be a bunch of scientists who say it's wrong.
Now, this is also important. He's undermining the credibility of experts who work to a scientific standard by saying any Joe Blow can just go, hey, I've got a critique. I don't know much about this, but I'm skeptical. And then equating the opinion of a non-expert to the hard work produced by experts. They want to undermine the social sciences. Here, I think he's undermining all sciences. He's actually not talking about the social sciences and social theory. He's actually talking about like medical, science, natural science stuff. So I do think in this case, because I've watched the whole video too, he is not only going after the social sciences here. He's going after, anyone who says follow the science, that's Dr. Fauci.
It might be one guy. Ask Einstein.
So he's like, one guy who might not be a scientist might be the person who points out these studies are wrong. Let me show you an example by citing a scientist who knew who he was talking about. Ugh.
100 scientists wrote a book explaining why his theory of relativity was wrong. He quipped, if I were wrong, then one would have been enough. It takes a lot.
How How is that scientific? What standard of scientific validity was that section on? Here's a guy who is a scientist, just giving his opinion about other people writing a book about him. It doesn't come down to opinion. End of the day, the reason why we still use Einstein is because his theory was tested and it works. It was tested again and again and again, and it keeps being able to predict outcomes or explain phenomenon. It's not opinions back and forth. It's not just doubt. All right? If you have a problem with a scientific result, not liking it isn't sufficient. Was there a data collection problem? Was there a methodological problem? Was there an operationalization problem? Was there like some sort of test that should have been run to check for something that wasn't run? These are all reasonable things to ask. But if those boxes are ticked and the results are the results, the data are what the data are, and not liking them isn't good enough reason to throw out all the science and go, well, it might be right or it might be wrong. This is an anti-science video.
To convince scientists to accept a new theory, especially if that new theory refutes what they had always believed. In some cases, what they'd staked their entire careers on. As Richard Feynman, one of the most eminent physicists of the 20th century, famously said, science is the belief in the ignorance of experts.
It's anti-intellectualism, anti-science, anti-understanding the basis of science and why we can have certain amounts of confidence in our conclusions. He's not talking about how scientists decide what evidence, what findings are reliable. All he's doing is planting seeds with these selective quotes as to how experts don't know what they're talking about.
What Feynman is saying is that a good scientist should always maintain a healthy amount of skepticism.
Yes. However, when studies are properly done, there is then that healthy amount of skepticism has been addressed. And what he's not doing, what Brian, if you're watching this, here's where you're being a tool of the far-right white supremacist, demonetized on YouTube and other places, and also identified by the Southern Poverty Law Center propagandist hate group, Prager, is that you're undermining the entire basis of science, and you're not giving people a framework for evaluating when a scientific finding has been the result of a really good study, and you can have confidence in it.
Science is by its nature provisional. Science would stagnate if we merely accepted proclamations of past authorities.
And it doesn't. And also, just because something is in theory provisional doesn't mean that it's not reliable. Again, go back to your theory of gravity. The theory of gravity has been consistent in how it explains phenomenon. The theory of evolution is consistent in how it explains phenomenon. This idea that because we have a finding and we always make sure our theories can be tested doesn't mean our theories aren't explanations or our theories aren't reliable. Yes. Yeah, and also, like, if there's a new way of measuring something, if there's a new technology, if there is a new finding because of building on something else, be open-minded. But that doesn't mean that when there is a good scientific result or when multiple studies triangulate to the same result, that we should still be just radically skeptical of those findings.
So how do we do good science? This is not a new question. Since the 17th century, scientists have employed the so-called scientific method.
So the scientific method, shall we say, was not finalized in the 17th century. Falsification, which is the idea of hypothesis testing and how to formulate hypotheses in a way that your theory can be shown to be wrong, was not developed until the 19th century, 20th century. Yeah, 20th century. Popper, I think, was writing, with Freud and Marx, so like late 19th, earliest 20th century. So this is also a lie. That this sort of like, the scientific method is, was set out and it's fixed and it's just over here and it's this thing that we can't touch or question. It's like an engine that runs by itself. No, that's not how knowledge production or fact production works.
To guide their work. It's not a perfect guide by any means, but it's pretty darn good. The method involves 1, formulating a theory.
Now, formulating a theory, again, with a lay audience, you don't, by not defining a theory, you can it falsely gives people the impression that any speculation is a theory. Okay? And a scientific theory, Brian, is a it's a sentence with a series of connected like explanations for an outcome. It's a list of causal interactions or actions or interactions between a set of phenomenon that produces a specific result. Right? A theory is a causal explanation. And this is important because causality is something you then have to specify in your model. You have to have the elements of the causal chain that link back to your understanding of how the world is operating in order to measure the impact of your variables on the outcome. Right? So formulating a theory too, he leaves out deduction and induction, different ways of arriving at theory generation, which I get in the time he has. However, by not defining a theory in terms of how it works within science is, again, pushing, it's relying on a misunderstanding of and a lay use of the term theory. Like, well, that's an interesting theory, but what you mean is that's an interesting guess or speculation.
2. Predicting the evidence that should be found if the theory is true.
That's the closest he's gotten to being honest in this video. So, I mean, the evidence, it's not really the evidence. What you're predicting is the results, or you're determining what the criteria are that should be met if your theory were to be held to be true. It's close enough for a general understanding, but you're not really predicting the evidence. Your evidence is your data. That's what you're working from. What you're predicting are the influences or the impact of variables in the explanation of that evidence. So actually, he's not doing a good job here. You're not predicting the evidence. The evidence is your observation. Your theory is a test of explaining the observations.
3. Collecting data.
Well, collecting data is not enough. Your theory assumes that there are certain things working in the world. And in order to do that, you have to be able to, what we call, operationalize them. And the process of operationalizing elements of your theory is really super important. And I know natural science guy, Brian, I know that this is all self-evident for you because everyone's done the work and your job isn't very hard, right? But for other methods of doing science, including medical science and other things, you really do need to operationalize what various cutoff points are, or what counts and doesn't count, or how many, how you organize the data can have an influence. So let me give you an example from like something that would work in the medical sciences, so STEM, and also the social sciences. We all, both of these, forms of scientific analysis would agree that aging has various effects on you. Now, if you have a study where you're talking about the effects of aging medically or in the social sciences, are you going to measure age in years? So every single year is a way of going up or down in your outcome? Or are you going to group people by cohorts? Because you think younger people under this age are the least likely, but older people are more likely, so you want to kind of look at the age of the phase of life rather than just the age in years? How you construct that is more than just collecting the data. You have to think about how you're going to construct these variables in a way that validly represents the causal mechanism in your theory that you are trying to test. And he's not linking how all of these things come together.
4. Analyzing the data. 5. Refining the theory and presenting evidence to other experts.
Well, I mean, refining the theory is only necessary if for some reason the theory, no, you don't refine the theory and then present the evidence. What? No. You present the evidence and then your conclusion might be that the theory needs to be refined. I don't know if he's talking here about manipulating your variables in order to get the results you want, because that's not how you're meant to do the science. You don't refine the theory. I mean, you could run different versions. Let's say you run one model of your analysis, and you're like, okay, well, maybe my cohort thing, maybe like the effect you got, like whatever, didn't work out. And you're like, maybe I'm measuring this wrong. I'll go out and I'll try this in age and years rather than in cohorts, or whatever else. Or maybe you're like, there's this refining the theory. There's something that I should maybe control for, so I run a second model. But you don't refine the theory and then present. You don't tweak your results to get the results you want and then present it to others. You should do a clear test of the theory and let it fall or succeed on its merits. Present that evidence, and then you can speculate or even test out different ways to maybe improve the model fit or to improve the statistical significance by controlling for something else. So your model has to have the predictive veracity or be torn apart in peer review. Exactly. You don't refine your theory and then rerun it and then present it to others. You say this didn't work. So, okay.
The philosopher Karl Popper added one more item to this list.
And he doesn't mention that Popper was working, like in the late 1800s, early 1900s, because he's already said science was, finished in the 17th century, which of course isn't true.
Popper said a subject is scientific if and only if it can be falsified.
Now, there's something else he's leaving out about this. Popper was trying to find a way to describe the differences he saw between the predictions of Einstein, who was working with the natural world, who was making very precise predictions and was also making predictions that could be refuted, and comparing that with theorists such as Marx, Adler, and Freud, who had these sort of like very useful ideas. Sorry, I'm going to have to clear my throat for a second. But the problem was they seemed to be able to explain everything. And although, for instance, like the description of the id it can be quite useful and helpful and illustrative, it doesn't have the predictive power because it can't be measured in the same way. And it shouldn't, and a theory that is capable of being shown to be wrong is, let's see, how's the way I'm looking at it? If it's shown to be wrong, if it's capable of shown to be wrong, then you can delineate the limits of the theoretical explanation. And knowing those boundaries of when the theory does and doesn't work is actually quite valuable. If you have a theory that explains everything, ultimately you're explaining nothing. And so the idea that, we're always driven by the id and the ego doesn't allow us to explain differences in outcomes. However, the concept of the id, the ego, and the superego are still useful. So when it comes to scientific versus not scientific, yes, there are a lot of ideas that are not scientific in terms of falsifiability, but that doesn't mean they don't have a use in the way that we talk about things or try to understand our world. They may not be falsifiable, but that doesn't mean they're not useful.
In other words, if your theory can't be tested, if it can't be proven wrong, it's probably not good science.
No. Well, okay, what Popper actually said was that sometimes science gets things wrong, and sometimes pseudoscience happens upon the right answer. And so he was looking for a way to try to figure out, how can we delineate what is scientific? If pseudoscience can come to the right answer, then on what basis do we say that we shouldn't take these ideas? So it's not that it's like the thing about good science. This is a value question. Having a question that is falsifiable makes it testable science, right? Again, usefulness and what is scientific are not mutually exclusive.
This is just one reason why we have to be very careful about putting too much faith in models.
What? What? Nobody is asking you to put faith in models. No one should put faith in models. This is a straw man argument, a straw woman argument, right? Especially in the social sciences. So a model, first, he's not even saying what a model is, right? So for the people who are just joining us or who haven't heard my rants, right? A model is a series of variables that attempt to represent things in the world that we can measure in order to capture variance that explains an outcome. You don't need to have faith in a model. You don't. You can say this model uses variables that most appropriately capture the things in our theory which are speculated to be our causal drivers in order to see whether or not they are making the biggest amount of change in our outcome. You don't, again, there's no one in science asks you to put faith in models. No one asks you to put faith in the variables. In fact, we have a entire literature devoted to questioning the validity of various metrics we use when we are modeling our theories in different contexts, in different time periods. This is just ridiculous. The idea that faith should even be mentioned in this video is offensive.
They often can't be tested.
What the hell? What do you mean models can't be tested? The point of a model is to be tested! What are you saying? I mean, maybe he's thinking about theoretical physics, but he's not saying that. And you know, in his field, theoretical physics, like string theory, maybe that particular theory can't be tested, but the idea that models often can't be tested? Like, have you read published works? There are models of all kinds of things everywhere with specific falsified hypotheses, null and alternative hypotheses that are meant, the point of a model is to be tested. This is why I was so hyped up on this video. I was like, no, I'm doing this. I know I talk about the philosophy of science and how these natural scientists get it wrong all the time. And he's still doing it. Yeah, maybe he's talking about his collection of Warhammer 4000 models.
Models are predictions of the future based on current data.
No. I mean, yes and no. Models, I mean, the point of a prediction is to see whether or not it is an explanation. Now, there is a whole debate in the philosophy of science whether prediction is explanation. And there is a very good argument to be made that prediction isn't explanation. However, explanation is like a pretty, if you've described something, have you explained it, right? And there is a good case to be made that the best way to test a model is to make predictions. It doesn't, so this is a question like that's very deep, we don't have time to go into. However, this is just wrong. What was the phrase he said?
This is just one reason why we have to be very careful about putting too much faith in models.
No faith in models.
They often can't be tested.
Yes, they can.
Models are predictions of the future based.
Okay, sometimes they're predictions of the future. Again, this guy's myopic view of things. In the social sciences, like in political sciences, we always work with elections after the fact. You know, you can try to model turnout, and you can try to model vote share, but at the end of the day, you can't model the most important issue when deciding somebody's vote until after people voted. So in this case, you know, political science, we get a sample and we describe we do causal inferences in terms of our model, but we're describing something in the past tense. We're describing what already happened. So again, he's wrong. He is this is a problem. Like Thunderfoot also has this blind spot. The natural sciences do not teach philosophy. They don't teach their students how to, like, the basis of what they're doing. The way that the analogy I would make is, you know, philosophy of science is like the engine, and the engine underneath your vehicle will determine its performance, right? But because the natural sciences are seem so obvious, they just seem like, oh yeah, that's right there in front of my face, I just look, that they don't really take the time to think about the process of producing facts. And so in an undergraduate or even master's program, you will be taught how to drive the car of science, but you are not taught to get inside the engine and pull it apart and look at what underlies it. And this kind of scientific naivism in the natural sciences is oftentimes underlies their unjustified contempt for the social sciences, who think a lot more about these questions than they do.
Based on current data. They can easily get things wrong.
But if if a model is wrong, that actually tells us something that we needed to know. And because a model gets things wrong doesn't mean that we can't have faith, that we can't think that we have to assume our models are unreliable. That's what we're talking. No, he can't construct an argument. Yeah, this is a problem with not teaching or focusing on the humanities, is our inability to make good arguments or to know philosophy.
First of all, the future, in case you hadn't noticed, is very hard to predict.
And again, not everyone tries to predict the future. When you go back and you study, panel data for the last 20 years, you're not trying to predict the future. You're trying to explain. I already did this. This is going.
And the further out you go into the future, the less secure the prediction.
What? Like, what? You think the theory of gravity, models on the theory of gravity are less reliable now than they were when they were first described? What does he mean? Medical science hasn't been consistent? What, in 60 years or 40 years or something, medical science models won't work anymore? What does he mean that if you're predicting the stock market in 20 years, yeah, your predictions, your models might not actually account for what's going to happen in 20 years' time. But nobody who does that. The idea that somehow a theory is less reliable over time is ridiculous. Again, it's completely undermining the basis, misrepresenting the basis of science.
Second, the data may be incomplete or...
This is where the anti-intellectualism and the anti-science comes out. He's basically going, here, we can't have faith in our models. The farther out we go into the future, the less we can know. Our data might be incomplete. But he's not then saying, here are the remedies. In a study, if you're worried that data may be incomplete, here's how you evaluate the methodology of the study to know whether or not they've done up to best practices. This is an anti-science video by a physicist at a university in California. It's ridiculous.
Or even erroneous. It's human nature to want definitive answers.
And that is what the peer review process is for, and also why when there are data sets that have been falsified and it is discovered, it is transparent in the community and the person is called out and all of their works are noted as being, not reliable. But he didn't mention that, did he? Didn't mention that. How science holds itself accountable. Or how we have checks on these kinds of things. No, because that would actually then lead people to think that they can have a kind of rely on scientific results as being the work of honest intellectual pursuit.
But science can't always offer those.
All right, I missed that bit, so see what he said here.
It's human nature to want definitive answers, but science can't always offer those.
But what science can offer is honest, transparent, replicable results that are the best attempts and the most rigorous attempts to describe phenomenon accurately as they operate. But he's not going to say that. Most fraud isn't detected. I mean, the thing is that the fraud that gets through the peer review process is the fraud we find afterwards. So we don't have a good assessment for things that are caught up in the peer review process that never get published. If you see what I mean.
Furthermore, science is not concerned with fashion, authority, or majority opinion.
I mean, he is saying that science doesn't care about authority, and yet he's citing Einstein, and he's citing Popper, and he's doing appeals to authority in this video. And he also said science isn't subject to majority opinion. But early in the video, he said a lot of times, people might hold one view and science, one person will pipe up with an alternative view. There are modes of things that can be quite fashionable in science. So the fact is here, again, this guy lives in a little bubble free of deep thoughts on how the process of knowledge production or facts works. And so, of course, he'll say this kind of crap because he doesn't actually reflect on how this links back to what he said earlier into the video.
Case closed is not a scientific expression.
Said no one. Again, this is another straw man argument. Straw scientist. Who said case closed? No one in the scientific community would ever say a case was closed. What they will say is, well, okay, maybe, you know what? On the question of whether or not the Earth is a spherical globe or whatever, spheroid, is that what they're called? Case closed. On the case whether or not the sun revolves around the earth or the earth revolves around the sun, case closed. On the question of whether or not climate change is driven by human activity, case closed. So, no.
Science is never closed.
So, okay, we still have to debate whether or not the earth is round? Wait, I thought you said earlier. You see? Yeah, fresh... Who is that, Flint? Flint, you and I are on the same page. Fresh coffee time coming up. Damn. Yep, you're exactly right on that. We'll take a break and then we'll finish this up. Then we'll take a break and go back and look at the handout sheet that they provided with this.
If it was closed after Newton, you'd never have Einstein.
Again, straw man. If you didn't have straw man arguments, half this video would not exist.
Science has to be first and always about pursuing knowledge.
Science produces facts. Those facts, as in scientific results, are then contextualized by human beings who have to interpret them and provide them meaning, and that collective synthesized output is knowledge. So the scientific process doesn't produce knowledge. Humans produce knowledge. Our scientific method generates facts that require interpretation. He's missing out that step. And it's so frustrating to me. It's so frustrating.
Not about advancing a social agenda.
Another straw person, straw man, again. You know, scientific facts can undermine social norms or social assumptions or cultural views. And in those cases, yeah, it is about advancing a social agenda, which is one that is to counter propaganda or false beliefs or false views that cannot be sustained by the data, like scientific racism. So yeah, actually, science does have a social agenda, and that is the production of accurate facts.
No matter how noble it might be.
Yeah.
Science has no political party.
But there are political parties that are anti-science, and the people you're working for are anti-science. So although science has no political party, there are political parties that are anti-science.
Of course, politicians should use the best available science to help them make informed decisions.
Wait, I thought we couldn't have faith in the models. And I thought the results weren't good, and I thought like one person with an opinion could undermine everybody who has earned their degrees and gone through the peer review process. I thought it was the case that like, oh, you know, like we can't put our faith in this stuff. So which is it, Brian?
But remember, scientific knowledge is not the same as wisdom.
Again, straw man. You know, like... We're just going to finish this up because I need fresh coffee.
Knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad. So let's continue to look to science for knowledge.
Again, knowledge is a synthesis of the facts that are produced. Well, actually, knowledge can be a lot of things. Science is not the only thing that produces knowledge. Right? Art produces a certain type of knowledge. Literature produces a certain type of knowledge. It's not only science that makes this contribution, and everything that he said in this video has said, don't look to science for knowledge because it's unreliable, but also look to science. So dumb.
Knowledge we can use to improve the world. But let's not fool ourselves that science has all the answers to all our problems.
Said nobody ever. You know, again, straw man, straw man, straw man.
It doesn't. That's one bit of wisdom this scientist can give you.
Well, we certainly can't give us any wisdom on the philosophy of science because you got that wrong.
I'm Brian Keating, professor of physics at the University of California, San Diego.
How embarrassing for you. Okay, so let's see. To view the script, sources, and quiz. All right, so let's do that. I'm gonna freshen up my coffee. I'm also before I go, before I take off on you guys for a break, I just want to I'm
an astrophysicist at a major
shut up,
university.
Brian. Okay. Can I just push my smoothie lifestyle? I'm really okay. Yeah, I bought a little smoothie maker 2.5, 3 weeks ago, something like that. About every 7 to 10 days, I get 15 euros worth of fresh fruit in, frozen and fresh, I should say. And then every day I make like 500 milliliters of some sort of fruit-based smoothie. And this becomes my breakfast and my dinner. My breakfast and my lunch, and sometimes, depending on how fast I go through it, into my dinner. And it's just like, it's cheap, it's healthy. And then I like, for dinner, a lot of times I'll balance it out with like, I'll have proteins, or I'll go throw some veg in or something. But it's less expensive than other food. It's way easier to clean up. It freezes, so it keeps really well. And it's just like freaking really enjoyable to have like a fresh fruit drink around. So if you've ever thought, or you wondered about whether or not you should try doing like a smoothie thing, it is completely worth it. I absolutely love it, and I've become a convert. Okay, yeah, let me go ahead and update my update. I'm gonna update my coffee cup with fresh coffee. Oh, Kristi. And then I'll come back. We'll do like another half hour, because yeah, it feels like it's gone about an hour. So I'm going to do another 15-20 minutes on his Follow the Science handout. And then we'll be done with this takedown of Brian. All right, y'all. I'll only say hi to some people who've joined us since. So HK in the chat. Hi, I haven't seen your name. A to the K is in here. Toru Ok Asad. Pomama Sid. Hey. Who else? CAT. I don't recognize your name. Welcome if you are joining us. Haruka is in the chat now as well. And I already talked to Sibwolf. So I think that's, if I missed your name. Oh, Rumor with Legs. I see your name as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to comment in the chat. All right, everyone. Time to either stretch your legs, freshen up your drink, or have a comfort break. And we will be back in just a few minutes. Hello, and welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a good break. I hope you have your coffee or your drink or whatever it is that you are consuming or enjoying or not. Who's in there? 8 of the case. Just PragerU might not be as committed to intellectual honesty as they let me believe. Yeah, maybe. That could be the case. All right, so I'm going to have to share my screen now. That's not the one. That's not the one. This is the one. You're the one that I want. You are the one I want. Ooh, 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 honey. Okay, so let's see the... Oh, no. Facts and sources. Oh, this will be hilarious. Blah, 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 blah. The word science comes from the word Latin science. Okay, like nobody's doubting that. Science does not inherently result in wisdom, nor offer moral imperatives or direct social policies. This is not true. Does not inherently result in is the most weaselly word. The fact is that science is cited in terms of things like moral imperatives, and it is definitely related to social policies. What we do with the knowledge we gain from scientific inquiry is where wisdom, morality, and social policy enter the picture. Again, what's the source for this? An article in National Affairs by a dude called Dworkin. Who is this? So it's a dude with an opinion. Who is this guy? Honestly, like, National Affairs, I don't even know what's the remit of About Us. Is this a peer-reviewed article? What is this? About Us. All right, this is how you find out. National Affairs is a quarterly journal. Oh my god, it makes it home at the American Okay, so he's citing someone who works for... he's citing a guy's article in the American Enterprise Institute's own journal. I really have to stop myself from swearing. This is hard. I monetize this content, so I have to be very careful. All right, let's wiki this. He's a philosopher? Okay. I'm sorry, I am side-eyeing any journal put out by the American Enterprise Institute, because that is not a peer-reviewed journal as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, it's supported by grants from foundations, corporations, and individuals. It's commonly associated with conservatism and neoconservatism. So any publication in a non-peer-reviewed journal, to me, is not a citation properly. Certainly, it's not an authoritative one. What he wants us to do in this is to take this guy's opinion on what science is. So, no. All right, thank you, Flint. Again, the opinion of one philosopher, although you can say it's a source, is not. Is it? He's an anesthesiologist. What? Okay, he's got a PhD in political philosophy. What was his? Where medical research intersects with political control. Again, I don't see where he's got the grounding to, like, be talking about the philosophy of science here. Okay, so Charles Murray was on the board. Oh, this tells you all you need to know. That this isn't about... this is embarrassing for this professor, if I'm honest. The fact that they're citing non-peer-reviewed propagandist collections of opinions by far-right people is not a source. Related reading. Oh, he's pushing his own book, which is what this is really about, is making money. Scientific theories are believed to be true by a majority of scientists, can be and frequently are proven flawed. Generally, no. I mean, there are, Kuhn and Lackentoss, I think it was, who wrote about, the Kuhn's paradigm shifts, and the name of the title is escaping me at the moment because I haven't looked at it lately. But it's not actually the case that most scientific theories are proven to be flawed. I mean, well, okay, depends on what you mean by flawed. Like, if you're saying that they're wrong, if you're implying that they're unreliable here, sometimes, there are better ways to measure things or whatever else. But this idea that most theories are proven to be flawed is simply not sustainable empirically. Just because back in Sir Fred Hoyle had a view that was superseded doesn't mean that a majority of scientists are proven to be, their theories are proven to be flawed. Sack of crap. Yes, back in the day, some people had bad scientific ideas, but that doesn't mean, again, this is just undermining the credibility of science generally, which is, to me, bizarre that a physicist would be engaged in this. If that there is a consensus among scientists fails to take into account that a majority of scientists can be, again, these are all his things that he has to go back to are back to when we're just starting out. Of course, it's all based in physics. It's also over 100 years old. He's focused, if this was such a problem, if this was such a systemic problem in science, then why can't you cite theories from last week or last year? Why do you have to go back to Einstein in the beginning of the 20th century to try to undermine science? Heidegger was a boozy beggar. Yeah, exactly. Immanuel Kant was a real percent. All right. If a scientific theory cannot be proven wrong, it is likely not good science. You're not telling people what it means to be capable of being shown to be wrong. So this is providing people with a reason to not accept a scientific theory without understanding why they're being skeptical. Models are predictions of the future based on current data. That's not all a model is. They often cannot be tested. Again, what is this crap? And what is he's signing himself. Did they just seriously do a circular argument here? I'm dead. I am dead. What is the source of the claim that models are predictions of the future based on current data? They often cannot be tested and frequently turn out to have incomplete, erroneous data. What's the source for that? Brian's butt. Oh God, you guys are so crap. Brian, if you have any dignity, or if your chair of your department has any dignity, have this video taken down. Brian, have some integrity, please, as a scientist. If not, I hope your head of department will. All right, well, so PragerU is citing itself as a source. I wonder how many times they do that. Okay, just random thing to Karl Popper. At least it's a Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. At least they understand that they have to cite a philosophy thing here. How many times do they cite themselves, I wonder? Again, just a vacuous long... Look at this article. All right, here's their claim. Since the 17th century, scientists have employed the scientific method to guide their work. It involves formulating a theory, predicted, and their source for that is an entire article from here, which actually says that there's a lot more that goes on, like statistical methods for hypothesis testing, and the logical constructionism and operationalism, the logic of method and critical responses. You can't. So this is if a student in an essay made a specific empirical claim and then just linked like a website without saying like where in this website that claim was made, that would not be sufficient. It really wouldn't. Like, you'd have to say chapter 4, statistical methods for hypothesis testing, from the article by the Stanford University or Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy article on the scientific method. You don't just link. A typical way to be intellectually dishonest is to make a specific narrow empirical claim and then just link to an entire article and say, oh no, it's on you as the reader to find out what in this article I decided was this evidence. My God. What else? This is probably just another. They cited themselves twice. You can't cite your own video as your source. You can't cite they did this twice now. They cited their own video as the source of their own claim. Oh, mein Gott, ist das noch scheiße. Oh, du scheiß du. Okay, yeah, I think I can pretty much say scheiße, and it's okay, because I've seen it spelled out in the CCs, and it doesn't get blocked out by YouTube. But, oh, das ist doof. Alright, this is embarrassing. This is an embarrassment. Complete embarrassment. So just another, like, breaking down step by step how PragerU is a propagandist, anti-scientist, anti-science, anti-intellectual, right-wing group that attempts to make you less informed. And here they're actually using university professor to make you less confident that good science and rigorous science produces good and rigorous outcomes that we can rely on with a certain amount of certainty, but we can rely on it. Are we saying PU viewers will ever click those links or even know their links? Good question. I didn't go through every single one of them, but honestly, if you cite your own, like, I am the source of my own claim twice, that is pathetic. Pathetic. Brian Keating should be humiliated that he is associated with this organization, and he should ask them to take down his video. Yeah, mein Deutsch wird immer besser. I think, anyway. Yeah, I think my German's getting better. Ja, sehr gut. Aber du hast in der sehr, well, you put it phonetically, but yeah, S-E-H-R. Gut. But, all right. Well, anyway, people, that is my brain dump. This is your free Kristi expounding on all the ways in which natural scientists don't understand the philosophy of science, and yet still feel, being, overconfident, mediocre white men, that they can somehow make these pronouncements, and we should just believe them. Don't. All right, guys. Yes, so it sounds like this time period works well for everyone. I also like to have a little bit more relaxation in the. And by the way, Flint, thank you for the other 5. You've done 5 already. That's good. That's good. You're set for this week. I appreciate it. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this. What was this? Does anyone know of Tim Pool's producer, researcher, Lydia? She's on Twitter and she posts so much crap. Oh, totally dismissive of BML. I'm not surprised being in the Tim Pool universe. I always quote myself when I'm making arguments because I am circular and a jerk at the same time. Precisely. Try putting the ice into Scheisse. That sharpen the... yeah, I know. There's nothing Germans love more than to, like, correct you. Like, they'll tell you what you did wrong first. Yeah, I know my pronunciation isn't the best. Thank you for reminding me that I'm completely crap at German. That's like, I know that, people. Thank you. Yeah. I think Kev may be onto something with his policies on white people. All right, so yeah, let's meet again next week, Sunday at 1 o'clock my time, whatever that was your time. It's been a pleasure. Thanks especially to Flint for the financial remuneration. That's the hard word to say this morning. And for those of you who can't get away or can't, get enough of the sound of my voice, I will have a D&D session over on my channel, D&D with Kristi Winters, which I don't link below, but I could, I guess. Yes, and you're very welcome for the stream, everybody. It's been lovely. Thank you for spending part of your Sunday. No, yes, you are being very German about it. It's just, eventually it gets, like, I try to be very optimistic and positive about all of the ways I'm told I'm wrong. But psychologically, like, it does get burdensome to, like, do something 90% right, and then someone goes, yeah, but you got that part wrong. You're like, why do I even bother? So I'm trying not to be down about it, but, like, I know I'm crap at German, so it's fine. Like... it just reinforces what I already know. Okay, so yeah, have a great every day, every whatever the day it is. Have a great morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is, whenever it is you are. I have been Kristi. You all have been awesome. Mwah, 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 mwah. Safe, socially distanced, electronic blow kisses until we see each other again next week, Sunday. So yes. I think I did that. I'm Kristi. You've been awesome. So all I have to do now is say goodbye. I very oddly put the stream here, so you get to see me say goodbye to you. Catch you guys later. Bye.